You may be wondering, who the heck is Anthony Crispino? What the heck is a general manager? And why does it sound like an NFL role? Well, we'll get into that a little bit here in just a second. Hopefully, I can explain it to you, and hopefully, a little deep dive will help understand what they're going to do at Nebraska and how they're going to help. First things first, my name is Justin Adams. I'm a content creator here at Nebraska Football, the voice of college football. If you like what we do, please consider liking and subscribing. And I appreciate everybody's feedback in the comments. Appreciate everybody liking the videos. I really appreciate y'all's support. So thank you for those that continue to stay with us. And for those new subscribers, I appreciate you joining the channel, and hopefully you like what you see here. So let's get into it a little bit. We've gone or we've touched on the news of the Anthony Crispino hire, and of course the Keith Williams promotion to director of player personnel from the assistant director of player personnel. Now, the biggest question that I see and still see some places is, what does a GM do? Okay, so Anthony Crispino was a GM at TCU, was hired to be the director of football operations at Nebraska. Very, very somewhat interchangeable terms. There's little nuances to which each person does, including Keith Williams. But we're going to talk about the separate entities and what makes them work as a unit and where they, align in certain goals. So Anthony Crispino, to just go into his back past a little bit, was the general manager at TCU. And before that was at SMU under Sonny Dykes, and followed him to TCU. So let's just start at SMU. He was a creative director as well as a chief of staff. Chief of staff. I know it sounds like a military role, but it is there. It is on the but the responsibilities of the chief of staff, just for those that don't know, here it is. It says the responsibilities of a chief of staff in any industry are wide ranging, but in the sports industry, it's important for a chief to be extremely focused on the objectives and standings of the program, with so much riding on the success and positive regard of athletic organizations. Chiefs of staff serve sports teams, owners, and head coaches that are in a unique position to have massive impacts on their organizations. And Nina King from Duke described it as somewhat of a air traffic control type of role. They're really helping the flow of information, right? They're kind of, it's really behind the scenes style of work that they do. So they don't get a lot of face time. That's why we don't understand a lot of what their role is. But what they do is very important. They can stand in for the athletic director in terms of when they're not available for meetings, et cetera. And they give them the tools, the athletic director's tools, to make their job much easier. So just going into the background of what he has done before will help give us perspective on what he knows and what his expertise is in and what he's been successful in. Because each one of these jobs we mentioned, SMU and TCU, he was neither fired from either one of these jobs. SMU, he left to follow Sonny Dykes to TCU, and then, of course, was brought on by Nebraska as he was the current general manager of TCU. So now let's get into a little bit of the sneaky part of what he did at SMU that I saw that I think might be flying a little under the radar too, based on the overall picture of what they do. He was also a creative director at SMU. And creative directors, from looking them up, essentially what they do is they are the ones that kind of, do the whole social media, the media style of things, set things up in regards to, recruiting visits and photographs and stuff like that. So that's what the creative director does. So he has a very good, he's very in tune with the social media, what works there, what doesn't work there, et cetera. So I'm sure he will have some kind of role, in that, whether it be just a high level overview leadership role, we'll see. But I think that's a little bit flying under the radar, because I think that's something that he could really help the university with, as the university does have a very good team. Jay Litt on Twitter or X, whatever, if you want to follow him, he's great guy. Believe he does the video editing and stuff like that. So it's awesome stuff. But he will help kind of oversee that in most likelihood, because each one of these, as we go on, you'll see that each one of these roles is kind of independent towards the athletic director, and there are nuances that will change based on what the athletic director wants from that particular person. So let's move forward over into a general manager. So what does a general manager do? So GM, just going back to the history of GM, it started at Georgia Tech. And it's been more popular within the last 10 years. It served as a way to help manage, organize like recruiting, stuff like that, kind of like I mentioned before, managing and building the roster. It's similar to a general manager role in the NFL. The college game is steadily changing to, resemble the NFL in terms of structure, pay, all of that stuff. And the roles on the teams are also, starting to trend that direction. So he was a general manager there, helped evaluate, find players to the vision of the head coach, that he's going to oversee the operation that cuts the film up and really gives the coaches it's an efficiency type of thing where he cuts the film up. He'll give, the coaches what they need to see. Um, but this also means that he has to be very, very in tune with the coaching staff on their recruiting, what they need, et cetera. We'll get into a little bit more of that, but it's very, very important and something a lot to be said about Anthony Crispino coming in and one of the few people that Matt Rule hasn't previously worked with, so he must trust him in that regard. So, but GM very similar to director of player personnel. So that's what Keith Williams will be, is the director of player personnel. So it's very similar to Crispino's role as a general manager. Little bit of nuances in the difference, but when we get to Keith Williams, we'll get into that. Now, I say all that to say, as a director of football operations, essentially what he's going to be doing is he's going to be a high-level overview of everything that I've mentioned, including of what I'm going to go into with Keith Williams. He's going to help, coordinate everything from the NFL coaches, visits, to travel logistics. Again, big time help in the recruiting department, arranging face-to-face with coaches, with players, overseeing details of the player visits and scheduling and structure and the photo opportunities, like I mentioned before. So, and then also overseeing the roster stuff, et cetera, and being, right there for the athletic director with what he needs. So, the director of football operations, Anthony Crispino, is going to take that role. And then going over to Keith Williams, being promoted to the director of player personnel of high schools. Like I said, formerly he was the assistant in that category. And so he's going to be a little bit more on the recruiting side. He posted a tweet the other day that he was already on the recruiting trail, posted a picture. So he's going to be out and about at these high schools, and he's going to really be focusing on that recruiting side and some of the stuff I mentioned in the more the latest job description, where it's more of the recruiting stuff, scheduling the face-to-faces and stuff like that, and the visits and cutting the film and all of that stuff. So he's going to kind of oversee that, and then from there, Anthony Crispino is going to kind of oversee the entirety of the operation there. So. The biggest things to take away with this, like I kind of mentioned earlier, consistency is key. Sorry, my notepad moved. Consistency is key. They have to make sure that the messaging is the same as the staff. And I've talked about the importance of what the staff has been doing well in recruiting thus far. The reason we haven't lost players and the reason why we're landing a lot of the guys is the messaging, no matter who's visiting these guys, is consistent. No person on the staff is making promises they can't keep. They are all sticking in line with Matt Rule's philosophy, what they can offer, and nothing more, nothing less. So when they do that, it leads to these players coming in and being like, okay, everything I was promised, I got, or everything I was told would be here is here. And that is how you keep players and retain players. And that's why we have not seen a lot of exits and departures from this, in my opinion. Now, when you have a guy who oversees all of that and determines film and sets up, he has to know exactly what the coach is looking for and exactly the type of player he wants. Now, Matt Rule was asked about this in the past. An athletic article, I believe back in 2022, they did an interview with Matt Rule on this specific things. And, what Matt Rule mentioned back then that are the valuable things to him. He talked about sticking to the metrics and the traits he values. Like I said before, he likes people with athletic lineages, whether it be brother and sister playing college ball, father, mother playing collegiate sports of some kind. He really likes that. And when he's talking about sticking to the metrics and traits he values, what that means is Matt Rule has, he's not the type of guy who's just going to sit there and look at box scores. Matt Rule recruits on intangibles, again, because he thinks you can build skill set, but you can't build athleticism. The traits and stuff that he values are the physical attributes, the athleticism, um, and then the metrics that he values are, not necessarily just what shows up in the box score, more efficiency stuff, and just finding those things that he's, fine tuned that work that give him the type of player he can develop. But also the big thing he mentioned is at the same time, you have to be able to introduce new ideas and philosophies and not be too set in his ways. So the way he does it is he has 30 to 40 staff members in a room and they all watch recruits together, right? And the whole point here is to see what the consensus is on a certain player, right? And then he asks every single staff member to rank those players. Okay. Now, they're not going to rank them publicly. Okay. So he doesn't do groupthink. He wants individualized opinions. And he says, if you have an opinion, we will listen to it. We will take it into consideration. But at the end of the day, Matt Rule does have the final call. And he said there's never a player that they'll take that he isn't okayed, and he's responsible for the players they recruit. Like he takes full responsibility for that reason. But that's part of the reason why maybe some of these other coaches, from other places, like an SMU or a TCU that has had less resources but has still been successful in recent years, you know, maybe getting different perspectives from an outside guy like a Crispino coming from those schools, he can think that'll give him a different perspective on it. But at the same time, trust Crispino enough to be able to come in and, learn his philosophies quickly and be able to help him on this recruiting trail. So, um, it's a lot to like there. And again, it's going to fly under the radar. I know there's been a lot of videos about it. I know there's been a lot of posts about it, but still a lot of unanswered questions and all of these articles and stuff, none of them really explain what it is. So, hopefully that answers a lot of the questions. I know it's very muddy, but that's kind of how all these roles in college football really flow together because there's a lot of overlap in these roles and they're very, very athletic director specific based on, because each university has different needs. Each university has different focuses. And so we'll see what Trev Alberts makes as the big focus here. But this does have a huge impact on recruiting because that's what it's based towards, roster control and recruiting. And I think as Anthony Crispino is going to be a lot over roster control, getting the scholarships right and figuring out how to navigate that. But that's also comes in with recruiting. And then, of course, Keith Williams is going to be really overseeing the recruiting side of it. So it's, there's a lot to be excited about. And the biggest thing here is, it was surprising to see, Omar Hales get let go. He was a guy that had been with Rule for a long time. So it was surprising to see him go. But, it says a lot about Keith Williams stepping into that role. It says a lot about Anthony Crispino and what he thinks of these guys to bring in a new face and a face fans love, Keith Williams will be, promoted in the staff, well-deserved for him. So hopefully that clears up a few questions that may have caused a little bit more, but a little clarification for y'all. So again, if you like what we do here, please consider liking and subscribing. Again, all your support, I can't thank y'all enough for all the kind words and everything, you said. So if you want to drop, more comments with ideas, feedback, etc., feel free. I'm responding. I'm trying to respond and answer every single comment that y'all post. So drop your thoughts in there and I will get to them ASAP. So appreciate everybody tuning in again and, go Big Red, and I will see you on the next video. Peace.